So what's up, YouTube and Facebook fam? This is your boy Reg coming at you real quick. So I got something real quick I want to talk about now. You know, this is going to be something. This is going to be something that a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but we need to talk about it. Let's talk about Mr. George Floyd, and let's talk about what's going on in America and how that ties into Israel, how that ties into Marxism. And I'm gonna try to do some serious dot connecting on this one. So let's start with George Floyd. So I wake up one morning and my friend, he came and he said, "Reg, you got to check this out." So I looked at the video of Mr. George Floyd. I seen the video of Mr. George Floyd, and the police officer clearly had his knee in the man's neck. And I sat there and watched that man, you know, die 1 inch at a time. And I said, man, this is horrible. And so, and I sat and watched this. I said, wow. And then, and then I was one of the first people that went on record. I mean, I went immediately on Facebook and delivered a message and said, this is wrong. The way that this man died is wrong. And this law enforcement officer, he needs to be held accountable. And so I went immediately on record condemning this. But and so let me just clearly state this now, that, you know, Mr. George Floyd should not have died the way that he died. That was wrong, 100% wrong. And I believe that every black American agrees with that. Every white American agrees with that. Everybody I talked to, it didn't matter whether they were white or black, they agreed with that. And so, all right, so now, let's move on forward. So now, here comes these riots, right? Sorry about the rain. It's raining, so you might hear a little bit of rain in the background. Here comes these riots. Here comes the burning and the looting, and now we're gonna just set buildings on fire. We're gonna loot. We're gonna destroy businesses. We're gonna beat up grandmas, beat up grandpas, and all of this nonsense that took place after Mr. George Floyd's death. And we're going to build a statue for Mr. George Floyd. And here comes race baiting, race hustling, Al Sharpton talking about, you know, the white man had their foot on our neck for, you know, get your foot off our neck or whatever that. And then so he comes with his speech. So, man, first of all, let me say something about this. And I think you want to listen to this message, because I'm going to try really hard to connect the dots. America is headed towards Marxism. If we don't be careful, we're going to slip into the slippery slopes of Marxism. We're just going to slide right in there. Slide into Marxism, into communism. And this George Floyd event is one of the catalysts. I mean, it's been going on. This whole Marxist movement has been going on for decades. But this George Floyd incident is just another step towards that goal of Marxism. So I'm here to say that the way that Mr. George Floyd died was wrong. And but here's what else I'm here to say. Now they want to build a statue to Mr. George Floyd. I mean, matter of fact, they already built a statue. I believe they already built a statue. I don't even know where this statue is located at. So let me just say something about that. I'm not in favor of building a statue to Mr. George Floyd because of the wrongful death that he experienced. First of all, and I say this in love, Mr. George Floyd was not a hero in the black community. Now that's going to offend a lot of people. That's going to get a lot of people upset. But he wasn't. Mr. George Floyd had a long history of terrorizing people in the black community. Let's just keep it 100. Don't get mad at your boy Reg, because he's telling the truth. And so let's talk about some of his. I'm not trying to put his business out there. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to make a point. I'm going to connect some dots, so stay with me. All right, so look, he had 2 convictions of theft and delivery of a controlled substance in the 90s. I'm just going to talk about some stuff. He served 10 months in prison for theft with a firearm in 1998. He was arrested with criminal trespassing in 2002 and served another 10 months. Later in 2002, that same year, he served 8 months for a cocaine offense. I'm trying to say this slow so you can get it into your spirit. He served 10 more years in 2004 for another cocaine offense. Okay? In 2005, he got caught with 4 grams of cocaine, and he served 10 months in a state jail for that. I'm just trying to let's keep it 100. Let's talk. You know, y'all want to talk about George Floyd. Y'all want to just keep bringing it up. The media want to keep bringing it up. You know, and y'all want to just bring it, talk about it every single day, every day. So now, all right, so now you done woke me up and woke a lot of other people up. This forced me to do a little bit of research and look into his history, his past, and then now we got to connect some dots. But anyway, so now, worst of all, now here's something. In 2007, I want you to listen closely what George Floyd did in 2007. In 2007, him and 5 other dudes went to this lady's house. George Floyd held a gun up to her abdomen, pointed it towards her abdomen. Another dude had a gun up to this lady's head. The dude with the gun up to her head, he cracked her over the head with the gun. And then they went in there and robbed the place, robbed her. And I'm going to tell you what, a little toddler seen the whole thing. A little toddler was watching this and experiencing that. So what I'm trying to say is, even though Mr. George Floyd's death was wrong, and everybody agrees with that, black people and white people agree with that, but it is equally wrong to elevate him to hero status, to build a statue, and make him the symbolism of change, the symbolism of hero. You know, make him the hero in the black community, like he's the hero. He's not the hero. I'm gonna tell you who the hero is, and you probably never even heard of who this man is. His name is Mr. David Dorn. He was 77 years old, a 77-year-old black man. He was a retired St. Louis police captain. So when all of this senseless rioting and looting and all this nonsense was going on, Mr. David Dorn was called to a pawn shop. Now he retired. You know, he served as a law enforcement officer. He retired. He was a retired police captain in St. Louis, but he worked. Apparently, he must have did security work at this pawn shop. He got called to the scene because apparently the alarm went off, and so he wanted to go. He went to the pawn shop to make sure that, you know, nobody was in there burning and looting. He wanted to protect the pawn shop, and a 24-year-old black man murdered him, shot him and killed him and murdered him, and his blood spilled out on the ground. A 77-year-old black man, a law-abiding citizen. He was old enough to be my father. He was an asset to the community, an asset to the black community. I'm sure he was loved by his children, his grandchildren, and he served his community. But you know what? You never even heard about him. You don't hear about him. You know, what did they have? A golden casket or something for Mr. George Floyd and all this big celebration? Why aren't we celebrating Mr. David Dorn? Because he's the one that's the true hero. If we're gonna put a statue up, let's put a statue up of Mr. David Dorn, because that's who the true hero is, and along with many others. And there's a whole lot of heroes out there, and he's one of them. And so now let's start connecting some of the dots. Let's talk a little bit about Marxism, because I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention to what's going on. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm gonna tell you who's working behind the scenes, pulling the strings. Communist China. Let me say that again, Communist China. Communist China is trying to take over the world. You can read about Communist China in Daniel chapter 11, verse 44, Revelation chapter 9, verse 14 through 18, and then Revelation chapter 16, verse 12 through 16. And I believe that there's some symbolism, you know, because China is the red dragon, and you can read a little bit about the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. But anyway, and I believe there's a connection there, but I'm not here to really go into all that. I'm driving down the street, don't even have my Bible. I can't get to the scriptures. But anyway, So China wants to destroy America, family, folks, Facebook family, YouTube family. China wants to destroy America. So China has gained inroad into the mainstream media. They've gained inroad into Hollywood, the entertainment industry. They've gained inroad into our colleges and universities. They've gained inroad into our government. That's right, Congress, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and we have a compromised I don't call him the president. He's Resident Biden. He's not President Biden. Mr. Biden, if you're watching this, you are I will refer to you as Resident Biden because the election was a fraud. It's going to come out. But you're compromised. China owns you. So China has gained inroad into all of these industries. So here's one thing that China knows. China knows that Americans love money. Americans worship money. They'll sell their own country out for money. China knows that. You know, China has a 100-year plan to take over the whole world. A lot of people don't even know that. So China has gained inroad into our mainstream media. So a lot of the information that's going out through the mainstream media, especially through that fake news CNN, is false. You are being indoctrinated to embrace a lie, to believe a lie. And so most of that information is going through the mainstream media is false. And so they're trying. This is what's really going on. They're trying to pit each other. Let's talk a little bit about Marxism. This is how Marxism works. I hope we need to learn about Marxism. We need to learn about the life of Karl Marx. He was born in 1818 in Trier, Germany, and so he's the father of Marxism. He's the father of this whole entire movement. He's what you would call the father of communism. And so what they're trying to do in America is they're trying to get us to hate each other. They're trying to get us to kill each other, destroy each other. They're pitting two people groups against each other. You know, under Marxism, what you got to do is you got to pit two people groups against each other. It could be the employees against the employers. It could be the America First crowd against the American Marxism crowd. It could be the New World Order crowd against the America First crowd. It could be the Catholics against the Protestants. But in this case, it is the whites versus the blacks. The oppressors versus the ones who are being oppressed. So the oppressors is the white man, and then the ones being oppressed is the black man. So Marxism is when you pit two people groups against each other, you get them to hate each other, create an uprising, and what you do is, and China's behind a lot of this mess. Men like George Soros is behind a lot of this mess. I ain't going into all that about George Soros and other people that are involved in this whole movement. But China, I'm talking about China right now. There's other people involved too. And so they're behind all of this mess, and what they're doing is they're trying to create an uprising, and they want to overthrow the government, create an uprising. Get men like LeBron James to spearhead the whole thing. LeBron James is a Marxist. Now, whether he knows he's a Marxist, I'm not really sure about that. But LeBron James is compromised by China. China owns LeBron James. Most of his money comes from China. The tennis shoes that many of our kids are wearing, those Nikes, LeBron James, and then you got these jerseys and all of this paraphernalia, all of this stuff, most of this stuff was made in China through slave labor. So they used slave labor to make these tennis shoes. They used slave labor to make these jerseys and all of this stuff. And so LeBron James is getting rich off of slave labor in China. LeBron doesn't care. He's, you know, and so now let's connect some more dots. So China is a communist nation. LeBron James stands with China, which means he stands with communism. He stands with Marxism. He's in favor of Marxism. And so China is using men like LeBron James, like like a puppet on a string, to spearhead the revolution. Let's use him like a puppet on a string. Let's use him to spearhead this Marxist revolution, overthrow the government, and then let's take over this thing. Communist China wants to take over this whole thing. And so now here's what's sad about this. You have very beautiful people, beautiful Christians, sincere people who are being deceived. I have talked to Christians, and I've talked to, the other day. What's sad is I had a conversation with one of my friends the other day, and I sat down and explained to her. She gave me about an hour of her time, and she was patient with me. God bless her soul. God bless her heart. And she allowed me to explain. I did a complete and thorough teaching on Marxism, the history of Marxism. I went into the history of slavery, and I tied it all in. I tied it all with the scriptures, prophetic scriptures, and I tried to make it. I did my very best to make it all make sense to her. And I believe that I did a pretty good job of explaining exactly what's going on in America and how you got evil forces at work to destroy America because they want to take over. You got people that want to destroy America. I'm going to tell you why they want to destroy America. It all centers around Israel. I'll get to that next. And so I talked to her and I explained to her. I talked to her a little bit about who Karl Marx was, his ideologies, how his ideologies, his belief systems infiltrated communist China. His ideologies, his belief systems infiltrated communist Russia. His ideologies, his belief systems infiltrated North Korea, Cambodia, Venezuela. Wherever you see communism, you can always think of. Every time I hear about the word communism, I think about the word Karl Marx. So I try to explain to her that Marxism is gaining inroad into this nation through our mainstream media, because the mainstream media is compromised by communist China. Marxism is gaining inroad into this nation through Hollywood elites. Marxism is gaining inroad into this country through the entertainment industry, Hollywood elites, and then you got ESPN, you got athletes, with this whole thing. Remember last year we had to go through this whole thing with Black Lives Matter. You see, like the NBA, you seen Black Lives Matter written on the basketball courts. And it didn't matter. Now, I tried to explain to them that, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. It was 3 of them that founded it. They were all witches. But they said, Patrisse Cullors said, we are trained Marxists. And I went into great detail explaining all that, and they said we are trained Marxists. In other words, we follow the teachings of Karl Marx. And not only that, they say they pray to their dead ancestors. And they're against traditional families. They're in favor of all of this lesbianism and same-sex marriage stuff. Anything that'll destroy America, anything that'll destroy the family, they're in favor of that. They want to overthrow the government of the United States of America. And so, and I try to explain this to my friend, but I don't think she got it, but she's a very beautiful person. So I'm just putting this out there that innocent people, so it's not enough, so Marxism is taking over our college campuses. So many of our colleges and universities are being infiltrated by Marxism. Communist China is behind this mess. And so many of our college professors are teaching our children to hate America. And so, and again, China is behind a lot of this mess. And so you send your kids to school You send them to college, you send them to university, and you taught them about, you know, maybe they went there, they were believers, they were saved, they were Christians, and they knew the word of God before you sent them off to college. They knew the scriptures. But then they get to a college, they get to a university, and then next thing you know, a college professor, a liberal college professor, just indoctrinates them into this Marxism, into this Marxist ideology, and just poisons their mind. And then next thing you know, they hate America. And now they want to overthrow the government. Let me explain something to you. We have the best constitution in the whole world. And right now, to my black brothers and sisters, let me say something to you. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. So the Constitution of the United States protects all of our black brothers and sisters. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. But here's what happened now. If communism takes over, we will all become a slave again. This time we will become a slave of the state. A communist dictator will rule over the nation. And he's not going to honor the 13th Amendment. He's not going to honor the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks their citizenship rights. He's not going to honor the 15th Amendment, the right, which gives us the right to vote and all that stuff. See, so you got to know what's going on. Now, what's sad about this is many pastors are leading this thing. I talk to a lot of my black pastor friends, and I'm trying to warn them about this stuff, trying to educate them. And what do? They just constantly shoot spitballs at me. I'm like, man, you got to warn your congregation about what's going on. Let me say something to you black ministers out there. If communism takes over this country, you're going to be the first person they're going to be the pastors, and that includes black pastors, are going to be the first to be rounded up. You're going to be the first to be rounded up. And then followed by Christians, and then followed by just everyday American citizens who love their country, who love the Constitution of the United States of America. We all gonna be rounded up. And so it's time for y'all to wake up. This is foolishness. You know, this is total foolishness that, you know, we can't even have these conversations so that we can educate people. And, you know, and if you're one of those people and you're listening to this video and you don't understand what's going on, you want to get in touch with somebody that understands what's going on. Now, I don't understand everything. I understand some things. But you need to pay attention and put down your pride. Put down your self-righteousness, you know, man. And then but this whole movement, this whole George Floyd movement centers around Marxism. They don't care about George Floyd. Biden don't care about George Floyd. Me and you care about George Floyd. I'm sure I probably would have got along pretty good with the guy. I think. I don't know. I didn't know him on a personal level, but, you know, I grew up around, you know, people that got in trouble and stuff. So, and I love them. But the people that's pushing this narrative, they don't love George Floyd, and they're using that incident to divide us, to divide and conquer us. So which leads us to the last point, and then I'm out. I know this is kind of like a long video, but you need to know this stuff. I'm telling you what, Satan is the puppeteer, okay? China might be a puppet. Satan is the puppeteer. Satan wants to divide and conquer America. Satan wants Marxism to take over America. The reason why Satan wants to destroy America is because he wants to destroy Israel. America is a big brother to Israel. America, you know, God used, I say this over and over and over again on my videos, that God used America as an instrument to help usher in the rebirth of Israel on May 14th, 1948, which fulfilled Isaiah chapter 66, verse 8. And so we've always stood with Israel. And Israel is a nation right now. God used America as an instrument to help it, to enable Israel to become a nation again in order to fulfill the prophecies. This whole thing centers around the Abrahamic covenant. way back in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, when the Lord said, now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house and unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, Israel, and I will curse them that curse thee, and through you the nations of the world will be blessed. So God made a covenant with Abraham. He basically promised Abraham a nation, and then he also promised Abraham that through his seed the nations of the world will be blessed. That's a reference to Jesus Christ. That's in Genesis chapter 22, verse 18. And so Satan hates Israel. And so Satan knows that America is a defender of Israel. We would go to bat for Israel. We stand with Israel. So he wants to destroy America. He wants to use this George Floyd incident to create division, bring America down to its knees, and force America to bow its knee to communism, which is really the system of the Antichrist, the government of the Antichrist, so that he can take over Israel, destroy Israel. He wants to wipe Israel off the face of the map. Here's a message for Satan. Israel isn't going anywhere. God made an unconditional and eternal covenant with Abraham. He promised the Jewish people that land forever. He also told us that Jesus Christ would rule and reign on the throne of David from the city of Jerusalem for 1,000 years. Revelation chapter 20, verse 4 through 6. He'll be recommissioned to rule and reign forever. So there's nothing that Satan or LeBron James or any of these people that are woke can do about that. So what I'm telling you to do is, what you need to do is find a good Bible-believing church, find a pastor that can connect the dots of Scripture with history and with the headlines, and connect all the dots so that you can see the big picture. You know, I taught the kids in Bible study last week about wisdom, that there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. First of all, wisdom is the ability to see things from God's perspective. The ability to see things from God's perspective. That's first of all wisdom. But there's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is just basically when you collect information. Anybody can do that. Heck, I did that when I was in college, but I didn't have any wisdom. I might have had some knowledge. You know, when I took a test in college, we had to memorize definitions, we had to memorize facts, and we had to remember everything the professor taught us, and then we would be quizzed on it or tested on it. You'd be tested on how much information you retained. That's knowledge. So I was able to retain knowledge, but I didn't have wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. In other words, a person with wisdom is able to apply knowledge the right way. So, man, look, I'm just telling you, pay attention to what's going on in America. Don't be part of that. You know, I'm down with the revolution. You know, put your clenched fist in the air. Because let me tell you something about that clenched fist. That's a symbolism of socialism. And that clenched fist, and you know what? Marxism gained inroad in the black community back in the 60s with those riots that occurred in Detroit and I think in Los Angeles and then other places. It was before I arrived on the scene. I arrived on the scene in 1971. But I'm going to tell you what. So Marxism was gaining inroad into the black community, and then you had all of these riots and stuff like that. And so I talked to a gentleman the other day. He got on my bus because I drive city buses in Columbus, and he said he was down with the revolution. This dude was like 70 years old or 65 years old, and I guess they had riots going on wherever he lived at. I don't know if he lived in Columbus. We didn't get into all of that, but he said he was part of the rioting. You know, here's the thing. Here's what happened during those riots. They destroyed industry. They burned down buildings. Those buildings that they burned down, the businesses, the industries, the buildings, they just burned them, they looted them, and all of these businesses was moved to the suburbs, and they never came back to the inner cities. And so black communities are still dealing with the effects of that 60s, that Marxist movement that occurred in the 60s, you know, the riots and all that stuff. We're still paying for that because when those industries left, when those businesses left, they never came back. People lost jobs. People lost income. I'm sure that, insurance premiums had to go up, because now the place became dangerous. Now this was all foolish. This was foolishness. You know what I'm saying? What if you was one of those dudes riding? If you are in your 60s now, maybe even your 70s, and you were one of those dudes, one of those people back there riding, that was a very foolish thing that you did, because you helped to lead to the destruction of the black community, and we still never recovered. This thing still never fully recovered. But you was part of the revolution, right? Just like we saw these riots going on with George Floyd. They destroyed businesses, they burned down businesses, and they looted. And here's the thing. These people that burned down buildings, the 24-year-old man that killed Mr. David Dorn, and all these criminals need to be rounded up and put in prison. You know, y'all making a big deal about this so-called January the 6th insurrection. There wasn't no insurrection on January 6th. I personally know people who showed up to that thing. Now they may have planted some people there. Probably the Democrats planted some people there to stir up problems. But Mr. Trump he delivered a speech, and he told them, if you want to go over there to the Capitol building, to protest, you do it peacefully and patriotically. He didn't stir up violence. As a matter of fact, he even offered assistance. He offered thousands of National Guard. 2 days before January 6th even arrived, he offered thousands of National Guardsmen to protect the place. But Nancy Pelosi turned it down. So if he's trying to protect rioting from occurring, how can you blame him for the rioting that did occur? This is Marxism. This is foolishness. And so, my black brothers and sisters, be careful, because many of you are being used like pawns. You're being used like puppets on a string. Many of you black pastors, you down with the revolution too. You're being used like a puppet on a string. So don't let them use you like that. Get in your Bible, study the prophecies, learn about Karl Marx. I would encourage you to get a book called American Marxism, written by Mark Levin. I think you pronounce his name Levin, or Mark Levin, or Levin. It should be released in a couple days. I ordered my book, and he'll break it all down for you, because you're going to have to educate your congregations about what's going on. And I'm going to tell you what, if you don't do it, God will raise up somebody else that will do it. He'll raise up a no-name person like David. Nobody knew about David. He was over there on the sidelines tending sheep while King Saul was the king of Israel. But David had a heart after God, and God used him. There's a lot of us that have a heart for God. We love God. We love our families, but not only that, we love our countries. And so if you're not gonna get up there and preach the truth, God will use somebody to do it. Man, look, I gotta get out of here. I'm on the road. I love you guys. God bless.